Hi there, I'm Renos Vakis, lead economist at the World Bank, and your host for Accelerating Development Ideas for Impact. This is not your typical podcast. It's an AI powered conversation brought to you by the World Bank Institute for Economic Development, where we unpack the latest research with one goal in mind turning big ideas into real world impact. Let's get started.
Thank you for the introduction, Renos. So, I was just reading this new report from the African Center for Economic Transformation, one of our partners, titled Gender Equality and Economic Transformation Lessons from Africa. And it got me thinking, when we talk about big picture economic goals for a continent as diverse as Africa, there are these two massive themes that always come up: economic transformation and gender equality. And for a long time, it felt like they were on separate tracks.
They really were. For decades, the thinking was that if you get the economics right, if you achieve broad economic growth, then social benefits like gender equality would just sort of follow along naturally.
Right. Rising tide lifts all boats kind of idea.
Exactly. But what this report so powerfully argues is that that's not how it works. In fact, it shows they're not separate at all. They're deeply connected. One really can't happen without the other.
And today, we're going to get into that. The report finds that countries with greater economic transformation tend to be more gender equal, but it's not always a straight line. So let's start with the first big idea. Let's talk about productivity. Why is closing gender gaps in a sector like agriculture such a powerful driver for growth?
This is such a key point. The report makes a really strong economic case. Closing these productivity gaps isn't just a social goal, it's a core component of structural transformation. And the agricultural sector, well, it's a perfect example of where the potential is massive.
Okay, so what does that look like in real numbers? What's the potential economic gain here?
The numbers are pretty staggering. The African Development Bank estimates that if you reduce the gender gap in just the food and agriculture sector, you could increase agricultural production by up to 19%.
19%. That's not a small number. For an entire sector, that would boost the whole GDP and lift a lot of people out of poverty.
It would be transformative, truly. But there are these critical policy addressable barriers in the way. First, and maybe most fundamentally, there's access to land. It's the key productive resource often needed as collateral for credit, right? But women's ownership is just, it's critically low.
How low are we talking about?
Okay, get this. The report states that despite women representing 70% of family farmers, less than 20% of them have full access to the agricultural land they're farming.
Wait, so let me get this straight. 70% of the farmers, but less than 20% have full access to the land they're farming?
That's the reality. And it doesn't stop there. The report also finds these persistent gaps in access to livestock, labor, capital, credit, and even technical support like agricultural extension services. And then you have the social norms on top of all that.
So it's not just about physical resources, but also about perceptions?
Precisely. Deep seated norms often dictate what women can even produce. They are often limited to growing low value subsistence crops for the home, while men are positioned to grow the higher value cash crops for export. It limits their economic power from the very start.
So, by targeting these specific economic and social barriers in a huge sector like agriculture, policymakers could unlock some really significant economic wide productivity gains.
That's the big takeaway. It's a direct lever for growth.
That's a powerful point. The report also moves beyond the traditional sectors and points to a kind of hidden barrier, something it calls the burden of unpaid domestic and care work. Why is that so important for economic transformation?
It's crucial because it directly hits a woman's most important resource, her time. Economists call it time poverty. It limits her ability to even participate in the productive economy. This work is essential, It sustains households and entire economies, but it's often completely invisible in the national accounts.
Right. It's work that isn't counted in the GDP, but without it, nothing else gets done. Do we have any data on that time difference?
We do, and the disparity is stark. The report cites time use surveys showing that in Kenya, Women spend about 5 hours a day on unpaid work. Men spend 1. In Rwanda, for every hour a man spends on domestic chores, a woman spends 3.
5 to 1? 3 to 1. That's a massive gap. It sounds like such a deep rooted social issue. Are there practical things that policy can actually do about that?
Absolutely. And this is where it gets really interesting because the solutions can be so practical. The report shows that intentional policies can free up women's time and boost the economy. A pilot project in the Democratic Republic of Congo is a fantastic example.
Okay, tell me more. What do they do?
They piloted rural childcare centers. The goal was to address this exact challenge, women's childcare duties, and measure its impact on their farm productivity.
So these were actual centers set up in rural communities?
That's right. And the result? It had a direct economic impact. With their children in safe care during the day, both women and their husbands got more involved in commercial farming activities. It directly raised the family's income and overall agricultural productivity for the community.
So, what we might see as a social investment, something to help mothers, is actually a very smart economic policy. It's an investment in productivity.
That's it exactly. It directly addresses a key barrier, allowing women to participate more fully in the economy and enhancing their productivity. It's a win win.
So, to wrap this all up for our listeners, especially the policymakers, the report really offers two clear evidence based pathways forward. First, focus on that productivity imperative, identify and close specific gender gaps in key economic sectors.
Yes, addressing barriers like women's limited access to land and finance in agriculture can unlock major growth.
And second, invest in the hidden engine, recognizing that the burden of unpaid care work is a real economic constraint, and that social policies, like providing access to childcare, can have a direct and positive impact on productivity and household income.
That's the core message. It's about moving beyond just addressing the symptoms. Achieving an inclusive and sustainable transformation requires these intentional gender transformative policies. It's about creating an environment where the economic potential of everyone can be realized.
Over to you, Reynolds.
Thank you for joining us. You can find the full report on our website. Just follow the link in the description. Be sure to subscribe to be the first to know about upcoming episodes. And before you go, how do you plan to put what you learn into practice? And what topics you'd like us to explore next? We'd love to know. Until then, goodbye.